The big story nationally tonight, the public inquiry into the contaminated blood scandal, which has been described as one of the biggest disasters in the history of the NHS. It started to hear evidence from witnesses today. Around 3,000 patients have died since the 70s after being given infected blood. This inquiry is going to try and establish why the NHS used such dangerous blood and what doctors and politicians knew about it. It's being led by a retired judge, Brian Langstaff.
We have already requested a number of documents which we would not have got had this not been a statutory inquiry. It is willing to hold people to account where appropriate, and it will express its views at the end without fear or favour, affection or ill will.
That's Brian Langstaff, the retired judge who's leading this public inquiry. Andy Evans is joining me from Northfield. Andy contracted hepatitis C and HIV when he was 5 years old. He was at the inquiry today. Andy, evening to you.
Hello, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Good.
Just talk us through how you contracted hepatitis C and HIV. What happened?
So in the late 70s and early 80s, the government had failed to become self-sufficient in its own blood products, which was something that David Owen had tried to push through when he was health secretary in the 70s. For some reason, the funding that was put aside for that disappeared, and his personal papers were shredded, so we don't know what happened as far as that's concerned. But anyway, it left us with a shortage in the UK of blood products for haemophilia, and so we decided to import them wholesale from America. And blood products are created for haemophilia by pooling thousands of donors together to extract the clotting factor that's missing in people with haemophilia. And if a single donor of those thousands of donors in one batch is infected with something, hepatitis C, HIV, hepatitis B, then the entire batch becomes affected, which is why so many haemophiliacs were infected with all of these viruses back in the early 80s. I was one such person. I was infected in 1983 with hepatitis C and HIV at the age of 5. My parents told me when I was 12 or 13, when I had to go onto medication because my immune system was failing. I developed full-blown AIDS by the age of 16. There was no medication to speak of apart from a very nasty one called AZT. And I barely survived the following 4 years. In fact, I was told several times that I wouldn't, but I'm lucky to be here today to tell the story. 1,200 people were infected with HIV back in the day, and only about 200 are left alive now.
I'm privileged to be able to talk to you, and the impact that it's had on your life. Just explain that.
It's touched every part of my life, every part of my family's life. When I was in my formative years, being in and out of hospital, I'm always going to be playing catch up from that, to be honest. I am lucky to be alive, but it's taken a lot to catch up on the kind of life that I think I would have had should these infections not have happened. And because, you know, haemophiliacs are at the forefront of the AIDS epidemic, there's nobody alive older than those of us who now survive or who have lived with HIV longer. So every day is an adventure, if you like, in finding out exactly what's going to happen, because nobody knows.
And this public inquiry that started today, I mean, it's been a long time coming. There's been a huge campaign, so quite an emotional day for you.
It's been, when the inquiry started with its opening hearings last September, I think I used the word surreal. Today, I think I'd use the word juggernaut. I mean, we've heard the testimonies of 3 people today, each of them with different stories, each less harrowing than the other. And it's been, I've been chair of a campaign group for a long time now, and before that, I've spoken to lots of people who've been affected by this. But even so, when you see people sitting up there having taken an oath and giving their testimony to a statutory inquiry that's taken 30 years to get to this point, it's an incredible moment, and I'm privileged to be here today. I feel that it's a wonderful occasion that we managed to get to this, but it's taken far too long.
Yeah, I mean, we're going back to the 70s. I mean, today, the government announcing extra financial support for people in England who've been affected by this. I mean, the annual payments increasing from 46 million to 75 million. Maybe no coincidence that's been announced today. What does the additional money mean?
Well, we don't know as yet. What you've seen in the press release that the government sent out is all that we know as well. There's no details as to how that money is going to be spent, who's going to be in receipt of it. We put out a press release at Tainted Blood today that basically said we welcome that more funds have been made available, but until we know more details, we can't possibly comment. It's quite difficult, and you pointed out that the timing of the press release as well. I don't think there's a sceptical person would say that it was possibly done to overshadow the start of the inquiry proceedings. But fortunately, I don't think that's happened. I think the testimony that's been given today and the words of Brian Langstaff and QC Jenny Richards have held their own in such hostile environment. I just feel privileged that the people that have spoken today were able to do so.
Andy, I wish you well. Thanks for taking time to talk. I know it's been a busy day for you.
Thank you, Paul, very much.
Andy Evans from Northfield. This contaminated blood scandal. Andy contracted hepatitis C and HIV. He was just 5 years old.